Well, it finally happened. On Friday, July 22nd, 2022, just hours before a live SmackDown television taping, Vince McMahon, WWE Chairman and CEO, announced his retirement. It clearly wasn't done on his own terms, and he exited the company amid scandal. What's amazing about it is that this latest scandal was just the latest in a long string of controversies surrounding WWE's head honcho, well, now former head honcho, who had always managed to overcome them in the past. Just how did we get to the stage where he was finally held accountable, and how did he manage to dodge so many bullets before? I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 biggest Vince McMahon controversies. Join us. Number 10, hush money in the bank. And so we start with the likely reason that Vince McMahon, notorious workaholic and control freak whose life for the previous 40 years has been overseeing his WWE empire, decided to retire all of a sudden. The WWE Board of Directors had begun investigating the company's owner, CEO, and majority shareholder after they became aware of a $3 million payment that Vince had made to a former WWE employee to prevent her from discussing an alleged affair. The Wall Street Journal had uncovered not just one non-disclosure agreement relating to misconduct, but several more to the tune of $12 million. Or, several times what McMahon had paid to purchase WCW over 2 decades earlier. The investigation also implicated McMahon's longtime talent relations head, John Laurinaitis, claiming that he had had an affair with the first woman, a paralegal who was given a suspicious promotion and significant raise before becoming Johnny Ace's assistant. Vince initially stepped down as chairman and CEO pending the outcome of the board's investigation, but later took the decision to retire. Something tells me this is far from the last that we've heard about this. Number 9, the death of Vince McMahon. Vince has been game for anything when it comes to what he's willing to do as part of televised storylines, but some believe that he took it too far when he presented his own on-screen death. At the end of the June 11th, 2007 episode of Raw, McMahon walked through the backstage area to the parking lot and got into his limousine, which promptly exploded. It was an ingenious piece of trickery from a technical standpoint, but the cliffhanger ending had fans, investors, and even future US President Donald Trump concerned. WWE obviously didn't help matters by reporting the incident on their website as if it were real, with business partners calling Titan Towers to get answers and the company's stock momentarily taking a dip. It's also upset some viewers when WWE had their performers give scripted tributes to their kayfabe deceased boss, since some of them had actually had to do it for real when the likes of Eddie Guerrero and Owen Hart passed away. We never actually got to see how the Who Killed Vince storyline would pan out, as a horrific reality intervened, leading to yet another scandal. Number 8, the Montreal Screwjob. There were several people involved in screwing WWE champion Bret Hart out of the title on his last night in the company, but ultimately, Vince McMahon was the one who gave it the green light and lied to the Hitman's face in the hours before his Survivor Series 97 showdown with Shawn Michaels. The Heartbreak Kid, Triple H, and Gerald Briscoe were also in on it, but it was McMahon's decision to go ahead and do the dirty on his long-serving employee live on pay-per-view in the country where he was considered a national hero. It was a truly terrible way for Bret's stellar WWE career to end, but Vince was adamant that he would get the title away from him by nook or crook, even though Hart himself had presented various scenarios where he would drop the belt without doing it to real-life backstage adversary Michaels in Montreal. Unrepentant, the WWE CEO appeared on Raw after the fact and boldly proclaimed that he hadn't screwed Bret, but that Bret screwed Bret. Some of Hart's colleagues were so disgusted by the way he was treated that night in Montreal that they either no-showed the next night's Raw, or at least threatened to, or quit the company in protest. Number 7, saving Superfly? WWE star Jimmy Snuka was suspected of causing the death of his girlfriend, 23-year-old Nancy Argentino, who died in hospital after being transferred there from Snuka's motel on May 10th, 1983. Police had a hunch that domestic violence may have led to her tragic death, while the forensic pathologist who observed many cuts and bruises while performing the autopsy on Nancy's body determined that the incident should be ruled as a homicide. Superfly, one of McMahon's top babyfaces at the time, was never charged. But why? It has long been speculated that Vince may have involved himself in the investigation and pulled strings to get his star out of trouble, though that has never been proven, and the man himself has denied the accusation through counsel. Still, the death of Nancy Argentino was a black mark against Vince and his company, especially since he continued to promote snooker as a featured attraction for years after the fact, and lionized him with a Hall of Fame induction. Snooker was eventually charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter in 2015, but was declared not mentally fit to stand trial and passed away just days after the charges were dropped. Number 6. Tanzabar. This incident from early 2006 was largely dismissed and then forgotten about, but recent revelations have forced people to revisit it and treat it with more credence. On Royal Rumble weekend, Vince McMahon was accused of groping by a 22-year-old female employee of the Tanzabar tanning salon in Boca Raton, Florida, where McMahon was known to own a vacation home. According to reports, Vince asked the unnamed woman to take a picture of him to send to his girlfriend back in New York. After she did this, McMahon allegedly began showing her indecent photos of himself before she asked him to stop. Vince then tanned for 20 minutes, and when the employee went to clean the bed that he'd used, he allegedly followed her into the room and shut the door behind them. According to the woman, McMahon then tried to force himself on her before she pushed him away, with McMahon allegedly saying that he was only trying to have some fun. Florida police concluded that there was probable cause to charge Vince and issue an arrest warrant for simple battery, but McMahon, who denied the allegations at the time, was never formally charged due to insufficient evidence, and the story fizzled out. Number 5. Owen. Several wrestlers have died young while employed by Vince McMahon, but only one did so while set to perform a stunt on a WWE pay-per-view. Owen Hart tragically fell to his death while getting ready to make his entrance as the masked Blue Blazer from the catwalk 80 feet above the ring in Kemper Arena at Over the Edge 1999. It was, without a doubt, the most tragic event to ever happen at a WWE show, and fingers were pointed at the company's chairman afterwards. How did this happen? Did Owen need to perform such a risky stunt? Were the proper precautions taken beforehand? A lot of those answers couldn't be provided by Vince, and it would be hard to place the blame on him for the accident itself, but many were outraged that he continued on with the show through to its conclusion, even after Hart was pronounced dead live on the air. Vince and his supporters tried to defend him by claiming that it was an unprecedented situation and that nobody was in their right state of mind after what had happened, but his critics were adamant the plug should have been pulled the moment Owen fell. Number 4. Tribute to a murderer. When WWE announced that Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and son Daniel had been found dead in their home on June 25, 2007, the first response was one of shock and horror, followed by a flood of mourning for a man generally considered one of the greatest in-ring performers in wrestling history. That night's episode of Raw, scheduled to be, eerily enough, a memorial for the Mr. McMahon character, was cancelled, with WWE in its place airing a 3-hour tribute to the Rabid Wolverine instead. Colleagues cried and spoke about Benoit's character via 2-camera testimonials, while many of his best matches and moments were shown. Not long after the show went off the air that night, the horrific truth came to light. The deaths were being investigated as a double murder and suicide. Chris Benoit was the only suspect. McMahon was quickly and robustly condemned for essentially running a tribute to a murderer. There was speculation that, since he and WWE were in communication with investigators on the scene, that he must have known more than he let on, though this theory has never been fully proven. The next night, before an episode of ECW on Sci-Fi, McMahon let the world know that there would be no further mention of Chris Benoit on WWE programming going forward. Number 3, the Ring Boy scandal. WWE was embroiled by scandal in the early 90s, with one of the most unpleasant being centered around the young ring boys WWE would hire to set up shows. Director of Wrestling Operations Terry Garvin and announcer Mel Phillips were singled out for predatory behavior, with a man named Tom Cole asserting that Garvin had tried to solicit him when he was 16 and then 19, while claiming that Phillips had an unhealthy obsession with young men, specifically their feet. Vince denied knowledge of any wrongdoing during an appearance on Larry King Live, but New York Post columnist and fierce WWE opposer Phil Mushnick wrote that McMahon was aware of what was going on and fired Phillips for it, something that he had apparently told Mushnick during a phone call. Mushnick claimed that McMahon had said he subsequently rehired Phillips on the condition that he stay away from kids. Cole also accused Vince's right-hand man Pat Patterson of making overtures, and Patterson, like Garvin and Phillips, was let go, though he ended up returning to the company not long after. After Tom Cole's tragic suicide in 2021, his brother Lee called out Vince and Linda McMahon for their failure in protecting his brother and other victims. Number 2, the Steroid Trials. Vince has been dogged by controversy throughout his entire career and sued a bunch of times, but only once has it resulted in the actual United States government successfully bringing him to trial. McMahon was indicted in 1993, charged with conspiring to distribute steroids, possession of illegal steroids with intent to distribute, and embezzlement for allegedly using Titan Sports Inc. money to fund the purchase of the drugs. And so, in the summer of '94, United States vs. McMahon began in earnest. It was a spectacular and bizarre trial, with Vince himself showing up in a neck brace, and star witnesses like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior called in to testify in front of the court. In the end, Dr. George Zahorian, who had worked as a ringside doctor for WWE when they ran shows in Pennsylvania, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for his part in distributing the muscle-building candy to the wrestlers, as well as Vince himself. Meanwhile, McMahon walked away scot-free, cleared on all charges without his legal team even having to enter a defense. It was a big victory for the genetic jackhammer, but the trial had its consequences, and there was at least a moment when those within the company believed that the Big Cheese might get sent to the slammer. Number 1, Rita Marie Chatterton. In 1992, a former WWE employee directly and very publicly accused Vince McMahon himself of inappropriate behavior. Rita Marie Chatterton, the first female WWE referee, came forward and accused McMahon of physically forcing himself on her in the summer of 1986, shortly before WWE stopped using her. Appearing on the Geraldo Rivera television show, Chatterton described how Vince invited her into his limo to discuss her burgeoning career when things took an unexpected and unwanted turn. Because the story came out while WWE were in the midst of several other public scandals, it did get lost in the shuffle a little bit. And because the statute of limitations had passed by the time Rita Marie made her claims, charges could not be brought against McMahon. However, in the light of recent hush money allegations, Chatterton's story has found itself back into public consciousness. The woman herself resurfaced after 30 years of living in relative obscurity to speak with New York Magazine, who profiled the incident, including a corroborating account from Chatterton's friend and former WWE enhancement talent Leonard Inzatari, who worked as Mario Mancini.